Hello and welcome back. Today I'm trying out the brand new Rare Beauty Tinted Moisturizer, the new Lawless Concealer, and the brand new Patrick Ta Major Dimensions 2 eyeshadow palette. I received the first of my Sephora VIB sale orders and I could just not wait to get the rest of the things. I wanted to sit down and play with these right away. I have detailed timestamps listed down below in case there's anything you wanted to skip ahead to, as well as detailed product information if there's anything that you wanted to check out. I've got my full thoughts and first impressions, as well as a 12-hour wear test at the end of the video. And with all that out of the way, let's get started. I have the new Positive Light Tinted Moisturizer from Rare Beauty. I picked up the shade 24N, which I'm a little nervous about because I wear the shade 160C in the foundation. The packaging is interesting. There's this little slit in the side. I'm not sure if there's a purpose for this style of packaging. It's plastic. I feel like it's going to be a squeeze tube. Yeah. Okay, so it's a squeeze tube. It feels like a squeeze tube when you're touching it. I wear the shade 160C in the foundation, and it said that I should get the shade 16C in the Tinted Moisturizer, but that looked really light. So I went up to the next neutral shade, which is 24N, which I feel is like a really big jump between the two shade categories. But I figured going into warmer weather, I probably would do better with a shade that's a little bit deeper than a little bit lighter for my skin tone. So hopefully this matches well enough that I continue on with the video. It's not super runny. It's a little bit thicker than I was expecting. And the shade does look a little bit dark. I think once maybe it's rubbed in, it will even itself out. Maybe it was just because there was quite a bit of pigment sitting in one place that it looked deeper. So you're supposed to use your fingers, a brush, or a sponge to apply this. She also recommends going in with their primer, but because this is the first time that I'm using it, I don't want to use any primers. I want to see just what the tinted moisture itself feels like. So I've just applied this to about half of my face so that we can see what the coverage level is. Right. It's spread out to be a much better color match than it looked like it was going to be when I first applied it. It applied really nicely using my fingers. I don't feel like anything's sitting. It feels like it's all been really nicely absorbed into my face. It doesn't feel sticky or tacky or gritty or anything like that. It does feel like it's sunk in really nicely. So this half of my face has a little bit of the tinted moisturizer versus no tinted moisturizer. I think it's done a really good job at neutralizing most of my redness. It did give me a little bit of coverage, but not a lot. I still see a whole lot of problems coming through that I would like covered up. I am going to just finish applying at least one layer to both sides of my face before I go in with additional coverage. This does not have a sunscreen scent. If you're someone who is sensitive to the scents that are normally associated with sunscreens, I don't smell anything like that. I don't smell anything at all. I guess if I'm really trying to smell something, it smells a little bit, but it's not something that I think would be outwardly noticeable unless you were really looking for it. It seems to be quite masked. You can see that it's really evened out my skin tone and it's really covered a lot of the redness. My healing breakouts are still very apparent, so that is one issue that I would consider building on top of. Applying the second side of my face, it felt a little bit streaky, but that may just be because I was working at a little bit of a faster pace, but it was easily blended out. I did notice that it was clinging a little bit to my dry spots. I've got a drier area right around my eyebrows, and I noticed that it was really clinging to those areas, as well as some of the healing breakout spots it was sitting on top of and really enhancing that spot in particular. It was like sitting on top of it, not covering it, not absorbing it, not moving over that area. It was just sitting there in a glob. So that is maybe one thing to consider so far. It does feel really nice. It's sunken in completely to my skin. I do feel like I could add more product on top of this or continue moving on with the rest of my makeup. I am going to try to build up coverage using my brush real quick. I'm just taking a little bit more of the product on the back of my hand, and I'm going to use my Ulta Beauty number 13 foundation brush and just applying that first on the spots that I need the most coverage. It's not building up as much as I would have liked, on my healing breakouts. And I also notice that it's still clinging to those dry spots. And I'm not a fan of how it's wearing on my nose at all. It's been a while since I've had a foundation look this bad across my nose, but this one is really having some issues. This is meant to be medium to light coverage with a radiant finish. While I do agree that there is quite a radiant finish to it, I don't really agree that it's a medium coverage foundation or that it's really buildable. I'm having a really hard time building up on some of my easier spots to build up on top of. I don't necessarily expect that the more recently healed spots would be covered as well as some of the older, darker spots. But there is some areas that I would expect to be covered by a light to medium coverage foundation, and I just don't feel like this one is doing it. Moving on, I picked up the Lawless Conseal the Deal concealer, and what sold me on this was that it has caffeine in it. I am always down for anything caffeine related. I love caffeine related products. I love products that say they have caffeine in them. An immediate selling point for me is caffeine. For no real reason that I can explain other than an addiction. And I realize that there's no like coffee in this. It's not the kind of caffeine boost that you're getting from the concealer. It's just one of those words that I'm immediately like, yes, because this was in and out of my cart until I was really reading the description, and once I saw caffeine, I was like, oh, I'm sold. This is it. This is going in the cart. I swatched this and it's a little bit light, but I'm hoping that it won't be too light. It reminds me a lot of the vanilla shade from NARS. I think that if I had a foundation shade that matched me a little bit better, that this wouldn't look so starkly white against it. I do like the applicator that comes with the concealer. It is stiff with still a slight flexibility to it, so it made applying the concealer really nice and very comfortable. It said that you can highlight using this, or you can use this as an all-over face concealer. It dried down a little bit quicker than I was expecting, but I can still move it, which is nice. It's not sticking to those spots where I left it sit a little too long. This isn't looking like a full coverage concealer, maybe a medium coverage, but so far I'm not seeing full coverage from it. It's blending out nicely underneath my eye. It's not drying or making it crepey, and it's not texture enhancing, and I don't notice it sinking too much into my fine lines. It is having a lot of trouble right here where my scar is. It is not handling that part of my under eye well at all. Even though I don't have a scar on my other eye, it's still not adhering right outside of my eye. I don't know. I turned the lights down a little bit, so hopefully you can see that it's separating and looking, I don't even know how to describe what that looks like, but it's separating and it looks like it's breaking down. And it's the same thing on my other eye, but it doesn't look like it's having that problem anywhere else that I've applied the concealer, just on the outsides of my eyes. I have one spot in particular on my cheek, and it's like an absence of coverage. The concealer didn't cover it, the foundation didn't cover it. It's like very dramatically not covered. I also feel like the foundation's not sticking to this one particular spot right underneath my left eye. It feels like you can definitely still see my regular skin and all that redness coming through, and my nose is still looking bad. There's no coverage, it's patchy, it looks separated and very dry. So far, I'm not loving these base products, so we're 0 for 2 right now, but hopefully the eyeshadow palette can salvage this. Because I don't have any more new complexion products, I'm going to move on to doing my eyes. I'm priming using the Smashbox 24-Hour Photo Finish Shadow Primer. I really like this packaging and I think it's really pretty, but I am someone who actively uses my makeup. I don't have things that really just sit for long periods of time that go between being used. So this is already very dirty and I've only had it for a couple of hours. I do like the mirror that comes inside the palette. It's a very nice quality. There's no distortion. In my experience, the ColourPop mirror and the Tarte Man-Eater mirror are mildly distorting, so I always feel a little bit off when I'm looking at myself in those mirrors. I don't feel that when I'm looking in this one, and especially for the price of the palette, I would hope so. And then you have your 12 shades, your 2 creams that have the little compartment door, and then you've got your row of metallics, and then you've got your all matte shades down on the bottom. My battery died, so while that was charging, I did the rest of my makeup and one eye off camera. When I did my other eye, I prepped it using the Loyal Cream shade, but I found that a little bit hard to work with. So for this eye, I'm going to start with the powders instead of starting with the cream and see if that works out a little bit better. I'm going to take the shade Heartache on my Smith 232 and start working that through the crease. Probably should have made sure my brush was clean before I went in and added all of that eyeshadow. It's a little bit more intense than I wanted for a first go around. On my Smith 230, I'm going to go in with the shade Devotion. I did notice that there's quite a bit of fallout with this shade in particular. I didn't notice a ton of fallout with the other matte shades, but with this one, I definitely saw a difference. And also, I would say if you know you're going to use this eyeshadow palette, do your eyes first if you're planning on using the glitters or the metallic toppers, the glitter toppers, whatever you want to call them, because there's a considerable amount of fallout within those shades as well. And I'm using the Dose of Colors brush that comes in the eyeshadow palette. This is the shade Romance, and I'm packing that on the outer and center of the lid. And there is fallout, so you want to be careful. And because I have sausage fingers, I need to use a brush to get the inner corner. I'm taking the shade Adore, and I'm going to put that on the inner third. I'm going to take my Makeup by Mario Master Pigment Pro pencil in the shade The Perfect Brown, and I'm going to line my tight line and waterline. Now on my Sigma E15, I'm going to go back in with that deepest matte shade, and I'm going to press that on the lash line. And I'm really working the shade now on the outer third, really intensifying that corner. I'm placing my brush and then flicking the shade upward to blend it out. And I'm going to take this shade and work it on the lower lash line. Going back in with the 230, no new product on the brush, just whatever's left over, and softening the edges. 232, no new product, going over it, softening the lines. For mascara, I'm using the Cali Ray Come Hell or High Water. And here are the eyes all finished. I prepped this eye using the lighter of the 2 cream shades, and I do think that had more of an effect than I gave it credit for after finishing the other eye. And here's the finished look. I did go and try to curl my hair a little bit, but my hair is refusing to cooperate. I think there's a little bit of a style going on, but not much. First, talking about the Tinted Moisturizer, I'm not blown away by it. I'm actually not impressed by it at all. I've tried a lot of foundations, and this one for me is not something that stands out against pretty much anything else that I've tried. I just don't think that the Rare Beauty Tinted Moisturizer has anything special or unique about it. I don't feel like the formula brings anything new. The finish doesn't bring anything new. The packaging is slightly unique, but not in a way that makes sense for why it would stand out among other tinted moisturizers or skin tints. It's not something that I'm going to be like, oh yeah, this is really great because it's a unique bottle. There's nothing special about the formula or the finish or the application. I don't like how it applied over my acne scarring. I don't like how much it took to build up when you're claiming to be a light to medium coverage foundation or tinted moisturizer. If you're going to throw in buildable medium coverage, then I expect to be able to build and to get to medium coverage. If you're going to say that you're a sheer to light coverage tinted moisturizer, then that's what I'm going to go in expecting to get out of your product. But if you're claiming that you can get medium coverage and I can't get medium coverage, I am going to fault the product on that point. My overall first impression of the Rare Beauty Tinted Moisturizer is not great. I don't think it's one that you need to run out and buy right away, if ever. I am going to continue playing around with it, and I'll update you in a couple of weeks in a roundup video to let you know what my final thoughts on it are. I do want to try pairing it with the other products that it suggests pairing it with the primer, with the setting powder, with the concealer. So I do want to see how the Tinted Moisturizer pairs with other products across the line, and I have a couple of ideas for other products that I want to try using this with or mixing it in with to see if it performs better that way. But overall, as a whole, the Tinted Moisturizer was a fail for me. Moving on to the Conceal the Deal concealer. I wanted this concealer for the wrong reasons, and because I know going into it that I wanted this for the wrong reasons, my expectations are not high. I don't think that the concealer paired well with this tinted moisturizer. I am going to continue using the concealer with other foundations that I know better than this tinted moisturizer to see if I get better results. But the formula was nice. It's not drying. I like that it was a natural matte finish. I don't know that it is even medium coverage. It's definitely not full coverage. I don't even think I really got medium coverage out of it, but that may just be because it didn't pair well with the tinted moisturizer overall. So I am going to continue playing around with the concealer, but again, it's not one that I'm over the moon about recommending. It's one that you can definitely wait on and see if it's something you still want in a couple of weeks. For purposes of keeping this a little bit more condensed and to the point, I'm only going to be comparing the Patrick Ta Major Dimensions 2 palette to the Patrick Ta Major Dimensions 1 palette. I will have a separate video going up with 3 looks, swatches, and more in-depth comparisons to other eyeshadow palettes, but for right now, I'm only talking about this palette compared to the original Major Dimensions 1 palette. Okay, now that that's clear, I love Major Dimensions 1. I think that the tones are just about perfect, and I can find use in just about every single one of those shades. Major Dimensions 2, I really like the idea of when I saw it on the Sephora app. For me and my personal preference, I can take it or leave it if there's a shimmer or metallic formula inside the palette. I would use these creams and I would use these mattes, but as I'm looking at the metallics and the glitters in this palette, I'm not super drawn to them. And online, I think they looked a lot nicer, but in person, I'm just not feeling them as much. Whereas in the original palette, I am really drawn to these metallic shades. I can see myself wearing more looks using all of the shades in Major Dimensions 1. I really wanted to like the 2 glitter toppers in Romance and Adore, but there's something about them, once they're applied, they don't look like they do in the pan, at least for me. I thought that the Adore shade would be a little bit more of a champagne, and I thought that the Romance shade would be a little bit more of like a rosé or a rose champagne. I had this idea in my head of what they were going to look like, and it does not match what they actually do, so that was disappointing for me. I feel like the creams in this palette are different, and I don't know if it's because I've had the Major Dimension 1 now for so long that the creams are starting to dry out. And dry out might not be the right word, but maybe they're just not as creamy as they were when I first got it. But the creams in the new palette were a little bit more greasy. Felt a little bit more like applying Vaseline to my eye. I didn't think that these worked as a cream base as well as the creams in Major Dimensions 1 do. I think I like the idea of this palette more than the execution of it. If you're someone who's trying to choose between the two, I would say get the one that you think you would wear the most because they are expensive and you should get the one that you're going to get the most enjoyment out of using. But I personally would still recommend getting Major Dimension 1 before getting the new palette. I just don't think that it performs as well. I like the matte shades. I definitely am a fan of those, but I don't really like the creams in this palette. And again, maybe in a couple of weeks they'll dry up a little bit and they won't feel as greasy, but I'm not loving their formula as they are right now. And I'm not super impressed with the dimension in the shimmers. I don't really like the tones. And the glitter fallout seems like it's a lot more than I experienced in the first one. But that may just be a my palette issue and not an everyone palette issue. I am going to continue playing around with the palette, and maybe as I use it more and become more comfortable with it, I will have different opinions than I do right now. I just don't think that it's stand out enough right now that you need to feel like you need to go and buy it. I definitely think that you should wait to see if there are looks being created that you're really drawn to. I think that you should be reading reviews from people who've actually purchased the palette and not received it in PR to see what some real thoughts are about the palette. Hello again, it is 7 hours into my wear test and I wanted to give you a quick check-in. I'm in natural lighting. I've gotten a lot of glitter fallout from the eyeshadow palette, so I stand by my recommendation that if you're planning on doing your makeup using this palette, and especially the glitters, that you should do your eyes first. It's rubbed off almost entirely from my jawline and my chin, so I wouldn't say that this formula is particularly long-lasting. I didn't use powder to set any particular part of my face, so for that being the case, I think that everything is looking pretty nicely. Where I put the concealer, like, I don't notice any kind of emphasized texture or large amounts of creasing in my under eye. Aside from that weird separation problem that I had when I was first applying it, I don't notice any kind of problems where I applied the concealer. It's after 5 o'clock, so the makeup has been on for over 12 hours now. And just to address the elephant in the room right now, I am developing my self-tan. I've had it on since this morning and I'm ready to go wash off the tan, so I want to take the makeup off as well. So ignore neck down. What I really like about the foundation is that it's very lightweight, it's easy to apply, it wears very comfortably. However, being closer to 12-hour wear time right now, I'm very aware that it's on my face. I do feel at some point between my last check-in and right now, it's made my skin feel drier. My dry spots that I have along my chin, my healing acne spots that are dry, are feeling drier. I'm definitely more aware of the situation going on my face. The area around my nostrils especially is getting very dry and very tight feeling. It's starting to get very itchy and flaky. Here's the patch earlier that I mentioned where it just seemed to not get any coverage at all. It was like actively trying to not get coverage. And here's the irritations that I mentioned from feeling extra dry from the foundation. It's starting to just be very uncomfortable. My under eyes are still feeling okay. They're not feeling dry or tightened. I don't notice any super amounts of crepiness or weird separating outside of what happened when I first applied the concealer this morning. So I think the concealer is definitely something that I want to revisit soon. I think that the eyeshadow looks nice. I don't like the amount of fallout that the glitter has, but I think that's just something that comes along with that formula. I think the mattes look nice. I don't notice any kind of creasing. I think that it still looks relatively freshly applied. So in regards to the eyeshadow, I'm really happy with how that is still looking at the end of 12 hours. To wrap up my first impression thoughts, I think that the Tinted Moisturizer is a pass. I'm going to continue playing around with it because there are things that could change my mind on it, but right off the bat, I'm not super impressed with it, and I don't think that the reviews are being very truthful. I'm very weary of the amount of 5-star reviews that this Tinted Moisturizer is getting right now because it's very average at best. There's nothing fundamentally amazing or fantastic about this tinted moisturizer. There's nothing about it that performs better than many other tinted moisturizers in skin tints or light coverage foundations on the market. I am just not buying the hype right now, and I don't think you should either. The concealer, I'm excited to continue playing with. I think that it wore really well. It's been really comfortable, and I think that paired with a different foundation, I will really enjoy it. And the eyeshadow palette, even though I was a little put off by it this morning, I am happy with how it's looking. I'm happy with how the look overall turned out. I've got a couple of ideas for more eyeshadow looks that I want to put together. I want to try using this in conjunction with the original. Let me know what was in your Sephora haul, and did you pick up any of these products, and what has your experience been so far? I would love to know what your tips and tricks are for making some of these things work. Anyway, that is going to be all from me today. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I will see you again very soon in my next video.
Is that it?